people pitch a fit when I start asking who wrote those marvelous plays. They tell me to shut my trap, that they don't want to flap, nothing to unwrap about no authorship mystery. Truly, though, a merchant in grain who wrote Knavery, as with Richard III, though Henry V is possibly worse. And in comedy, how about Dogberry and the Romeos and Juliet's nurse? Shakespeare is infinite, Shakespeare's illiterate. Something here doesn't fit the Stratford story. Someone illuminate me. As for tragedy, there's Mark Antony. Lear and Hamlet are absolute gold. Puck is magical, but most tragical is the rubbish we have been told. Something just won't cohere, Stratford's a myth, I fear. Who is this Earl de Vere that I've heard of? Someone illuminate me. In those plays, I want illumination.
Welcome all to Shakespeare Illuminated, where we seek to shed light on each of Shakespeare's plays. I'm Michael Delahoyde, early convert from oboe to bassoon, with a doctorate from the University of Michigan, and afterwards professor of English. Art and brilliance give me hope. So, Shakespeare. Our mission is to appreciate the brilliance of his plays, and when considering the playwright's choices and sometimes baffling passages, to speculate how can we understand his work further through consideration of the Shakespeare Authorship Question. That is, if we free ourselves from the exasperatingly misguided notion that the works were written by the Stratfordian grain merchant Shakespeare, and instead by Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, using the pen name Shakespeare, such as the so-called Oxfordian perspective, are the Shakespeare works better illuminated? Okay, so this is just my own response to that as an academic and a scholar. Duh. The Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship's website, Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, all one word, .org, can inform you much about this perspective, as can my own site, Michael Delahoyde, all one word, .org. You want to be careful how you handle the Oxfordian information given in these series and on either of these websites. Know that the issue of the Shakespeare authorship question is hotly contested and too typically meets with hostility, especially in schools and colleges, where with religious intensity, it's even labeled a heresy. We don't want anyone flunking English because of someone else being too ill-informed and or intolerant. But want to find out what they won't tell you? We're going to explore now one of Shakespeare's most charming and beloved plays, Midsummer Night's Dream. Set in ancient Athens, though almost never depicted there, we'll see why, where we await a wedding but must cope with four young lovers forcibly mismatched, first by one oppressive daddy, but especially when some love juice from the fairies goes awry. Meanwhile, some incompetent townspeople try to prepare a play, and one of them gets turned into a jackass. But the fairy queen thinks he's hot. Our guest commentator today is Dr. Earl Showerman, president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship and the world's supreme scholar on the Greek sources showing Oxford as Shakespeare. He'll also, well, you'll see. You can enter comments into chat, which I'll try to keep an eye on. And if you have a more formal question, maybe you want to hit that Q&A button you should be seeing below. If we do not address these during the show, stick around for a Q&A immediately following. Here are some general questions we want to try addressing today. Why does Shakespeare choose Midsummer Night when there are indications in the play of earlier springtime settings? The time seems out of joint. Is there a moon or is there not a moon on the wedding night with the play within the play? The time seems out of joint. What is Bottom really saying and not saying in the famous Bottom's Dream soliloquy? And since every love couple represents a type of relationship no one should want, forced or contentious or abusive or drug-induced, why in the end do we not feel a sense of nihilism, but in fact, quite the opposite? So roll up for our magical mystery tour. First, I want to address the title, Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, this is one of those dismissive ones like As You Like It or What You Will. And Charles Beauclerk, the Oxfordian, says, don't be tricked by this. Dismissive throwaway titles are deceptive. The more Shakespeare seems to be giving us fantasy, the more frank he's being and the more substance you're going to get. It seems like maybe we're going for that state of mind in Midsummer where it's really hot, although climate change has shifted away from this date, June 23rd to 24th, 624, June 24th, where maybe you are heat fried brain is giving you alternate states of consciousness and you're more given to fantasy and fairies running around and enchantment and all of that. But I think far more important is the 624. Midsummer 624. June 24th is ostensibly the day that the Earl of Oxford died. But 624 start showing up all over the canon when you're looking for them. And sorry to go all codes here, but Edward de Vere, or backwards, Earl of Oxford. The dedication page to the sonnets is full of 624s. There are plays and indications weird here and there, all referring to 624s. And again, it's so rampant that some of us really question, did he die on 624 just to make it work out? Or is there something questionable and rigged there? Well, this play has universally been suspected of referring to somebody's specific wedding. It would be a good play to perform at a wedding. And the traditional dating for at least the version we end up with is the mid 1590s. Particularly, there were three marriages, two or three marriages right around then. And although different, even Oxfordians have different opinions about which one is most relevant, one of them was the daughter of the Earl of Oxford. His oldest daughter, Elizabeth, got married at that time. But in any case, let me say a word about sources, which, but briefly. The play starts with Theseus and Hippolyta coming to Athens. Theseus is the ruler of Athens. He's called Duke, which is completely anachronistic. But partly, Oxford gets this from Chaucer. Chaucer gets this from classical literature, where Theseus has come back as a conquered queen of the Amazons by Theseus, and Hippolyta comes back, and Theseus is going to marry her, but she is a conquest. And usually what happens is that wailing ladies get in the way and delay him, and he's got to go off and save people and go to wars and all that. And one of these accounts is given in Chaucer's The Knight's Tale, which is one of the two wholeheartedly imported Shakespearean plays. The Two Noble Kinsmen has Theseus and Hippolyta returning too. Now, we know that along with Plutarch, that the Earl of Oxford purchased a copy, maybe on Amazon, of Chaucer, along with his Plutarch in 1569. So he has access to these works, and I'm not sure grain merchants do. In 1566, there's a lost play called Palamon and Arcita, and those are the two young knights that play into the story of The Knight's Tale and Two Noble Kinsmen. It's attributed to an earlier Elizabethan playwright in Elizabeth's court, but there's something suspiciously Oxfordian about it. And some people do suspect it was an early work by the same guy who translated Ovid's Metamorphoses, credited to Oxford's uncle, Arthur Golding, but uncharacteristic of that man's work. And it ends up being Shakespeare's favorite work, Ovid's Metamorphoses. In there is the story of King Midas. But first, let me say that for the ass's ears part of the story that we're about to hear, Apuleius's The Golden Ass was translated into English in 1566, and I know people who think that too is an early Oxfordian effort when he was translating like mad and learning everything like mad. The work is dedicated to the Earl of Sussex, Oxford's mentor at the court. And so a lot of people think it's the same writer who did Ovid's Metamorphoses, where King Midas, famous for his golden touch, so golden ass, is famous for his golden touch. A lot of people don't know the second story in there, which is that he judges a music contest and a god is offended and gives him ass's ears. One more background bit and another Chaucer connection. The Tale of Sir Topas. This is Chaucer's Persona's own tale, where Topaz says, me dreamed all this night, pardie, an elf queen shall my leman, my lover, be. Well, kind of irresponsible for him, but handy if it inspired Oxford to write this play. All right, into it now. Theseus, as I said, ruler of Athens, is anxious for the days to pass, 4 days, and he wants to get married. And the very first lines of the play, we've got a scene. Here it is.
Now, fair Hippolyta, a nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires, like to a stepdame or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue.
4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like to a silver bone you bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities.
Well, that's weird. The first image is of an old lady who just won't die. She's wasting all her money on cat food when I'm trying to inherit. But as crass as that is, keep in mind this image of this dowager, which recurs. And what's that all about? We're going to wonder. The other question is the moon. So we're being told here that the moon is going to be a new moon. The old moon wanes, and it's going to be blank, presumably on the night of this wedding, when we're going to have the play within the play. But this contrasts with what we're going to hear later on. And the moon shows up so many times in this play that to insist that, oh, well, Shakespeare revised and he was really sloppy about it, just doesn't cut it. Something's going on with the moon. And remember, if you've heard this before, the moon is associated with Queen Elizabeth quite a bit, and we'll explore that a bit more too. Well, intruding upon all this is Aegeus. He's an overbearing father figure, and this young man, Lysander, is in love with his daughter, Hermia. And excuse me, because I tell my students, these young lovers, if you can't tell the difference between them, don't worry, because they're all literally interchangeable throughout the play. So I'll try to keep them straight. But Hermia and Lysander belong together because of this disapproval. And a lot of people have speculated you've got an overbearing father figure like this in a lot of plays. You've got Polonius, Brabantio, and Othello. It's an archetype, but it is tempting to see Lord Burleigh, Oxford's father-in-law, as the model for that kind of character. The language is weird in that the daughter, Hermia, is called a form in wax by your father imprinted, and it's within his power to do whatever he wants. The Hermia having to yield her virgin patent up is a weird way to put it. And people keep talking about the rights here. Now, Demetrius is a lover or former love interest to Helena, and now he's decided he wants Hermia, and we have no motive for this whatsoever. It's random. But again, the language, he has a title to a certain right, or he wants to prosecute his right, and there's reference to your father's will. And this is all textual and legal language. It's almost as if Hermia is an artistic creation, or that something is churning here about legal language and depersonalizing her. And of course, we know that Oxford had the legal background, and grain merchant guy, of course, did not. The second weirdness about this scene where Hermia is being browbeaten into accepting this guy she doesn't want, Demetrius, and giving up Lysander, is that she's got choices under supposed progressive Athenian law. If she disobeys her father, she can die. Or she can give into it, which she doesn't want to do. Or she can live her life as kind of a Vestal virgin, chanting faint hymns to the cold, fruitless moon. Wed Demetrius, as your father wants, or on Diana's altar to protest forever austerity and single life. Well, Diana is the moon goddess, the virgin goddess, and frequently associated with Queen Elizabeth. And this would be the life of you if you were a lady in Queen Elizabeth's court. You're going to sing hymns, but you have to be a maiden for the rest of your life. And there are other Elizabeth connections and court connections too, but added to that questionable choice is an assertion that unnecessarily that thrice blessed they that master sow their blood to undergo such maiden pilgrimage. It's really admirable. But earthlier happy is the rose distilled than that which withering on the virgin thorn grows, lives, and dies in single blessedness. Now, if Queen Elizabeth is absolutely given over to this image of herself as the Virgin Queen, hearing about withering on the virgin thorn, and I thought her motto was Rosa sine spina, rose without a spine. Apparently roses do have thorns. Well, that's going to be kind of a touchy assertion there. We'll keep it in mind. Well, after hearing what her choices are, all pretty grim, in comes Lysander saying, "How now, my love? Why is your cheek so pale?" What an idiot. Did you hear what he was there? He just heard all of this. Well, the problem is that people worship at the Church of the Holy Shakespeare and everything has to be deep. And they always play this, oh, this is really tragical and deep. It's actually probably a holdover from an earlier slapstick version of something, especially when you get verse. And listen to this. Yeah, it's really deep. The course of true love never did run smooth. Oh, but, oh, cross, too high to be enthralled too low. Or else misgraph it in respect of years. Oh, spite, too old to be engaged too young. Or else it stood upon the choice of friends. Oh, hell, to choose love by another's eye. It's just cheesy and trivial, and these characters don't deserve to be treated as great Shakespearean creations, I don't think. Well, Lysander has a plan. Let's run out of town. He has an aunt, a dowager of great revenue on the other side of the forest. There's that dowager again, and we'll never see her, and they'll never even get there because they'll get lost. But Hermia informs Helena of the planned elopement, and Helena's upset because Demetrius is now interested in Hermia, so she decides she's going to try to tank the whole thing and tell Demetrius what the plan is. So he'll run into the forest, and she'll run into the forest after him, and everybody's just got to get to the forest. That's what we're all about here. And Lysander unnecessarily refers to it should be easy because the moon is going to light up the night for us and our way. I thought there was going towards no moon. Again, contradictions. All right, next, here we got some mechanicals. These are the local tradesmen, especially Nick Bottom, the weaver, and you want to play around with the idea of weaving, weaving tales, weaving, spinning, combining things. It's a nice metaphor for Shakespeare. These guys want to put on a play before the Duke, and they've got one called The Most Lamentable Comedy and Most Cruel Death of Pyramus and Thisbe. This is a story from Ovid's Metamorphoses, again, Shakespeare's favorite book, and again, possibly translated by the Earl of Oxford. It resembles the Romeo and Juliet story. Oh, she's dead, I must kill myself. Oh, he's dead, I must kill myself. The end. Oh, and our families didn't get along before. Well, the leader of the group, Quince, names off the parts. And the main person we're interested in is Nick Bottom. And here's where he finds out what part he gets to play in this scene.
What is Pyramus? A lover or a tyrant? It will ask some tears in the true performing of it. If I do it, let the audience look to their eyes. I will move storms. I will condole in some measure. To the rest, oh, yet my chief humor is for a tyrant. I could play Heracles rarely, or a part to tear a cat in to make all split. The raging rocks and shivering shocks shall break the locks on prison gates. And Phoebus's car shall shine from far and make and mar the foolish fates. This was lofty. Now, name the rest of the players. This is Heracles' vein, a tyrant's vein. Lovers more condoling.
At the end of this practice or this introduction, the troupe decides we don't want everybody seeing what we're doing, so let's go to the edge of town, and they're going to go to the Duke's Oak. And again, Duke is an anachronistic title for ancient Athens, but we're not in ancient Athens. Richard Rowe, Oxfordian, discovered in absolute trust that Shakespeare Oxford knew what he was doing, especially with Italian matters, found out that a little town named Sabbionetta, a walled city that was created in the 16th century, just a stone's throw from Mantua, partly one of the ground zeros for Oxfordian studies, was known at the time as La Piccola Atena, Little Athens. And not only that, but one of its architectural passageways is still known today, apparently, as Il Crentia de Duca, the Duke's Oak. So it's not a tree outside a town that we're meeting at. It is Sabbionetta and a little archway. And I might even have a picture of it because I didn't know what I was doing when I was there. All right, next we meet the fairies, and first all is Puck. He's also known as Robin Goodfellow. This is a name that shows up in Anthony Munday's comedy Two Italian Gentlemen, printed in 1584. Munday was in Oxford's service at that time, and it seems like an extraneous bit here because no one really ever calls him that. But meanwhile, Oberon is the king of the fairies, and his name comes from Alberon, A-U, but Oxford wants to change it to Oberon and inhabit this character, at least at one stage of this play. In fact, someone has suggested too that Oberon, you've got O, Oxford, and Baron, like Baron in Love's Labour's Lost. But in any case, Ovid uses the term Titania, the queen of the fairies, for the moon at one time. Her common name would have been Diana, the virgin goddess, again associated with the moon, and Queen Elizabeth's maids, if I may have said before, were considered nymphs and fairies. In both the quarto and the folio, Titania is never mentioned in the stage directions as anything other than the queen. Well, these two are at odds over an issue here, and we've got a scene of their argument, which is a little troubling.
Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania.
What? Jealous Oberon? Fairies, skip-hence, I have forsworn his bed and company.
Tarry, rash wanton. Am I not thy lord?
These are the forgeries of jealousy. No knight is now with him or Carol blessed. Therefore the moon, the governess of floods, pale in her anger, washes all the air that rheumatic diseases do abound. And this same progeny of evils comes from our debate, from our dissension. We are their parents and originals.
Do you amend it then? It lies in you. Why should Titania cross her Oberon? I do but beg a little changeling boy to be my henchman.
Set your heart at rest. The fairyland buys not the child of me. His mother was a votaress of my order, and in the spiced Indian air by night, full often had she gossiped by my side, and sat with me on Neptune's yellow sands, marking the embarked traders on the flood, when we have laughed to see the sails conceive and grow big-bellied with the wanton wind, which she, with pretty and with swimming gait, following, her womb then rich with my young squire, would imitate and sail upon the land to fetch me trifles and return again, as from a voyage rich with merchandise. But she, being mortal, of that boy did die, and for her sake do I rear up her boy, and for her sake I will not part with him.
How long within this wood intend you stay?
Perchance till after Theseus's wedding day. If you will patiently dance in our round and see our moonlight revels, go with us. If not, shun me, I will spare your haunts.
Well, give me that boy, and I will go with thee.
Not for thy fairy kingdom. Fairies away, we will chide downright if I longer stay.
All right, so all the chaos, most of the chaos in the play is going to emanate from this contention between the fairies, not just the weather, but all the other chaos that's coming too with, the love juice. The language is troubling because we hear about progeny, that they are the parents of this problem. And some Oxfordians have noted some potential wordplay in this extraneous Indian matter, an Indian air. In Diane, air. In Diana, an air. And Shakespeare is often playing with the air, H-E-I-R idea. So next, I want to quickly give another scene right after this where Oberon decides, well, because Titania is too stubborn to give him this little changeling child, this little boy, that he's going to mess with things in this way.
That very time I saw, but thou couldst not, flying between the cold moon and the earth, Cupid, all armed. A sudden aim he took at a fair vestal throned by the west, and loosed his love shaft smartly from his bow, as it should pierce 100,000 hearts. But I might see on Cupid's fiery shaft, quenched in the chase beams of the watery moon, and the imperial votress passed onward in maiden meditation, fancy free. Yet marked I where the bolt of Cupid fell. It fell upon a little western flower, before milk white, now purple with love's wound, and maidens call it love in idleness. Fetch me that flower, the herb I showed thee once. The juice of it on sleeping eyelids laid will make all man or woman madly dote upon the next live creature that it sees. Having once this juice, I'll watch Titania when she's asleep, and drop the liquor of it in her eyes. The next thing she waking looks upon, be it on lion, bear, or wolf, or bull, or meddling monkey, or on busy ape, she shall pursue it with the soul of love. And ere I take this charm from off her sight, as I can take it with another herb, I'll make her render up her page to me.
And so he sends off Puck to get this love juice. This scene is universally declared the one big tribute to Queen Elizabeth, the fair vestal throned by the West. For Europe, Eurocentrism, England is the West, and she's the fair vestal, the virgin on a throne. And Cupid aimed at her, but he missed, and so she passed on, and so she's the virgin queen in perpetuity. Hooray. And then where did the arrow land? It was quenched, in the chaste, watery moon. But the moon is Elizabeth too. Could it be that we want it both ways? That the Virgin Queen just passed on and everybody can say, oh, look, he missed. And secretly something else happened too. And we ended up with a purple flower. Now, I don't want to have this thing last for 4 hours, but I really need to introduce this contentious matter within Oxfordian studies about Prince Tutor theory or succession theory. Did Queen Elizabeth have a kid? Should there have been an heir to the Tudor throne? No, absurd. I mean, she's on the public stage forever, except Oxford's mistress, Anne Vavasor, hid her pregnancy, I guess, because of fashion at the time, for the full 9 months until giving birth, and then everybody ended up in the Tower. So a lot of people would say, don't go there. We've got a big enough hurdle to try to get people to question the authorship itself without adding another conspiracy layer on the top. But certain plays will take you right there, not to prove anything, and I really am not pushing this, and I don't even want to believe it, but I do think that as a theory, it's worth mentioning. There was something fishy going on in the household of Catherine Parr, the widow of Henry VIII. Elizabeth, as a teenager, lived there with Catherine Parr's new husband, Thomas Seymour, who was grasping, and they all got along really well. They played tickle games in bed in the morning and all that until Catherine Parr wasn't invited one day. There was a lot of flurry and worry and inquisitions. So some people now believe that she did get pregnant and have a child in 1548. That child was Edward, placed like a changeling child, a cuckoo egg, in somebody else's nest. And that would have been the 16th Earl of Oxford's. Others think that in the 1570s, when the Earl of Oxford was the favorite and people were worried that he was just absolutely going to be a king if she ever stopped dithering, and if it weren't for his fickle mind, that he and Elizabeth had a child who was considered a cuckoo egg, a changeling child, and placed in the household of the Earl of Southampton, and grew up to become the next Earl of Southampton, the only person that Shakespeare ever dedicates anything to, and suspected of being the fair youth in the sonnets. Well, too much to go into about why he was never acknowledged, but some old dowager is not giving over her inheritance or making acknowledgments in this play. And here, if we've got it both ways, and this love shaft ends up in the watery moon, and ends up as a little western flower, purple with love's wound. We've got purple flowers showing up all over the place. At the end of Venus and Adonis, that love affair ends up with a purple flower. You've got the beginning of Two Noble Kinsmen again. Primrose, the first heir of Vere being spring, but wow, that's pretty direct. And in Twelfth Night, violets, violas, the stuff is there too. So I bring it up here because it seems like we are dancing on the edge of even more dangerous material being given. All right, well, the lovers are coming into the forest, and Demetrius and Helena show up. Helena's chasing him. He wants nothing to do with her. And she insists, I'm your spaniel, spurn me, strike me. And it seems kind of like an unhealthy relationship in that regard. But Demetrius is going to pursue Hermia until Oberon witnesses this, is offended, and says, put that love juice in his eyes, because we want him to pursue Helena instead. So Demetrius gets his little dose. Titania and her entourage are doing ritualistic fairy work or whatever they do. Hermia and Lysander show up, and they're exhausted and they're lost because who knows where that dowager's house is, and I suppose the moon is or is not, I don't know. And they're going to fall asleep. And so Helena sees this sleeping couple and is concerned about that. But she runs off and everybody's getting drugged. All right, but back to the play within the play. These characters are going to the Duke's Oak and starting to practice their play. They wonder and worry, is there going to be a moon on the night of the play? And they even consult an almanac and says, yes, there's going to be a moon, so we will be well lit. Well, I thought there wasn't going to be a moon, so we're in two different time frames here, weirdly. They bungle everything. And instead of the lovers meeting at Ninus's tomb, they keep saying Ninny's tomb. So Pyramus and Thisbe are on opposite sides of the wall. Their families are contentious, and they got to meet together secretly at Ninny's tomb. And you look at the footnotes, and the footnotes will explain to you, well, it's a reference to Ninus's tomb because he was the second husband of Semiramis, queen of Babylon. And although she made the city the most magnificent metropolis in the world, she also put her lovers to death because she didn't want them talking about what a slut she was. So Ninny's tomb is the grave of someone who was so stupid, he announced that he had had an affair with the queen. Yikes. Well, Puck decides to mess with things and he thinks these people are nitwits. And so let's mess with Bottom. Let's do something with him and turn him into a monster. Here's our scene of Bottom.
I see their knavery. This is to make an ass of me, to fright me if they could. But I will not stir from this place. Do what they can. I will walk up and down here, and I will sing, and they shall hear. I am not afraid. The woozle cock so black of hue, with orange and tawny bill, the throstle with his note so true, the wren with little quill.
What angel wakes me from my flowery bed?
The finch, the sparrow, and the lark, that plain song cuckoo gray, whose note full many a man doth mark, and dares not answer nay. For indeed, who would set his wit to so foolish a bird? Who would give a bird the lie, though he cry cuckoo? Never so.
I pray thee, gentle mortal, sing again. Mine ear is much enamoured of thy note. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape, and thy fair virtue's force perforce doth move me, on the first view to say, to swear, I love thee.
Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. Yet, to say the truth, reason and love have very little company together nowadays. And more the pity that some honest neighbors will not make them friends. Nay, I can gleek upon occasion.
Thou art wise, as thou art beautiful.
Not neither so. But if I had wit enough to get out of this wood, I had enough to serve my own turn.
Out of this wood, do not desire to go. Thou shalt remain here, whether thou wilt or no. Come, fairies, wait upon him. Bring him to my bower. The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye. And when she weeps, weeps every little flower, lamenting some enforced chastity. Tie up my love's tongue, bring him silently.
Right. And tie up my lover's tongue, bring him silently. We've got to shut people up about the truth here. Well, back in the forest, it's all chaos, of course, and all that Puck gives us is, Lord, what fools these mortals be. Not a lot of help about perspective. Now, because of the dosing of the eyes, we've got two men pursuing Helena where nobody wanted her before, and she thinks this is just a cruel trick that they're all playing on. And when Hermia comes into the scene and says, what's going on here? Helena thinks, you're in on it too. And so we've devolved into chaos. You know, real love is supposed to ennoble, but when you're in the forest and taking mud baths and throwing each other in the dirt, it's probably a parody of love. So we got one more nice bit with Bottom in his ideal life among the fairies, where he's living it up. And it's impressive that this is the one guy who can operate among the mechanicals. He can operate in fairyland. He'll be able to operate at court as an actor and among the actors too. So there's something about him that we're going to like.
Monsieur Cobweb, good monsieur, get you your weapons in your hand and kill me a red-hipped bumblebee on the top of a thistle. And good monsieur, bring me the honey bag. Do not fret yourselves too much in the action, monsieur. And good monsieur, have a care the honey bag break not. I would be loath to have you overflown with a honey bag, signor. Where's Monsieur Mustard Seed? Give me your keef, Monsieur Mustard Seed. Pray you, leave your courtesy, good monsieur.
Well, Oberon realizes things have gotten out of hand. Everything's chaos. Let's restore things. Her dotage now, I do begin to pity, he says, even about Titania. So he tells Puck he now has that changeling child, that boy who we never see, and let's undo things. Oberon will put the magical eye drops into Titania. She wakes up usually next to Bottom as the ass, and she's disoriented and says, "Me thought I was enamored of an ass." And that's a nice quote. Well, not a nice quotation, but it's something that unfortunately applies probably to a lot of people. But enough of that. Anyway, she and Titania and Oberon reconcile to get together again. And Oxfordians feel that this represents the contentiousness and the banishment resolved after a meeting between Elizabeth and Oxford. Quote, after some bitter words and speeches, in the end, all sins are forgiven, said someone at court about Oxford's end of his dark period. Now, in Act 4, there's a bit that's thrown away. And again, people throw away stuff they don't understand, that don't advance the plot, and they are the key to the plot. And here it is, a scene where Theseus and Hippolyta are just out on a hunt and just talking about the noise.
Go, one of you, find out the forester. For now, our observation is performed, and since we have the word of the day, my love shall hear the music of my hounds. Uncouple in the western valley, let them go. Dispatch, I say, and find the forester. We will, fair queen, up to the mountain's top and mark the musical confusion of hounds and echo in conjunction.
I was with Hercules and Cadmus once, when in a wood of Crete they bayed the bear with hounds of Sparta. Never did I hear such gallant chiding, for besides the groves, the skies, the fountains, every region near seemed all one mutual cry. I never heard so musical a discord, such sweet thunder.
Rife with paradoxes, sweet thunder, musical discord, musical confusion in conjunction. let's leave it out. Except what you're leaving out is this perspective on the fact that amid the chaos, that is, in apparently the traditional English hunt, you're going to have chaos, you're going to have noise, you're going to have dogs of different sorts doing different sort of barks for different purposes. You're going to have horses' hooves and neighs, you're going to have people on trumpets doing different signals and all of that, and it's going to be madness. Theseus says, let's go up to the mountaintop and it's all going to be a harmony. You're going to get a bigger perspective on it that way. And this works in terms of sound. So when you're playing second oboe in row 3 and you're hearing mostly the clarinets over there and the bass sax next to you, that's a distortion, it's chaos and it's noise. But if you're the conductor, or if you're the audience, you're in a position to hear the harmony of it all, and it all comes together and it makes sense. In this play, if you're one of these loving pairs here, supposedly, it's chaos and it's a mess. And we need to resolve that. And I think we will. But even better, this is an insight into life. Hamlet says something similar, which sometime I hope to tell you. Joseph Campbell, comparative mythologist, says something similar. And it's that when you are in life, most of the time, it feels like it's chaos. It's random, it's arbitrary. There's no sense to it all. But if you're lucky, you get up to the mountaintop at some point, or you get to a point probably later in life, where you look back and it all seems to have had a shape. It all seems to have made sense and gotten you to where you are. It wasn't random as it seemed at all. So that's what we're looking for here in this play too. How are we going to get music out of discord? Well, these characters stumble upon the lovers who are all clustered together, I guess, somehow. And the notion is that, what are they doing together? I thought they hated each other and were running after each other when it was all chaos. But apparently they're getting along. So maybe they came out to observe the rite of May, it says. Well, that's got to be either off the mark or another problem with the time frame here, because I thought it was supposed to be 624. Anyway, the couples wake up. They're confused too about what's happened here. And how come you aren't trying to kill him when you were laying so close and you could have slit his throat? And then, I don't know. It's just, it all worked out. Except, again, we forget that Demetrius is still under the eye drop spell, loving Helena. But that's okay, because everybody's with who they should be, I guess. All right, well, let's go. The couples will be knit at the temple, and that's capitalized in the quarto and the folio, usually not in most editions. We're just going to the temple. Richard Rowe, Oxfordian, on the trail of Oxford in Italy, back in Sabbionetta again, found this, La Chiesa dell'Innoranata, the Church of the Crowned Virgin. That's where they're going to get wed. And the Church of the Crowned Virgin sounds like another honoring of Elizabeth to me. All right, off we go. Now, poor Bottom. He wakes up from his dream, and here is what he famously has to say about that.
I have had a most rare vision. I have had a dream past the wit of man to say what dream it was. Man has been an ass if you go about to expound this dream. Methought I was, there is no man can tell what methought I was. Methought I had, but man is but a patched fool if he will offer to say what methought I had. Oh, the eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, Man's hand is not able to taste, his tongue to conceive, nor his heart to report what my dream was. I will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream. It shall be called Bottom's Dream, because it hath no bottom. And I will sing it in the latter end of a play before the Duke. Peradventure, to make it the more gracious, I shall sing it at her death.
At her death. Well, methought I was, when any character in literature or drama interrupts himself or herself, pay attention. Methought I was, there's no man can tell what, methought I was and methought I had, but you got to be an idiot if you go around saying what you thought you had. A lot of actors muff this and then start to reach for the ears, think, I thought I had donkey's ears. Bottom never knew that he was an ass at that time. No. Methought I was the consort of the fairy queen. Methought I had an affair with the virgin oops fairy queen. But you better be an idiot if you're going to go around saying, yeah, Queen Elizabeth and I were like, never mind, back in the day, or whatever happened. The idea of bottom's dream, because it has no bottom, is the notion that you're the only character not in your dream. You are the viewer and see out and everything else. So if you're not there, it's yours. But if you can't go around saying, hey, I had a great time with the Virgin Queen, what can you do? Well, you can put it in a play. And that's what we think he did his entire life. Now, as I shall sing it at her death, the only explanation anybody ever has is, oh, he must mean Thisbe, because at the end of the play, Thisbe's going to die. We haven't heard of Thisbe in 2 acts. So, wow, for pronoun antecedents. And I can't help but wonder, is this a kind of a non-Freudian slip again about that dowager who won't die and announce who is her inheritor? Well, that's pretty dark. Maybe I don't want to go there. So Bottom reemerges. Everybody's delighted to see he's back. They were lamenting his absence. Their play can't go forth, and they eulogize him as a very paramour of a sweet voice. And somebody corrects that guy and says, paramour. No. You have to say paragon. Paramour is, God bless us, a thing of naught, a nothing. A lover, a paramour, is nothing. And that's Bottom. Well, Bottom does come back. Everybody's delighted, and he says, Masters, I am to discourse wonders, but ask me not what, for if I tell you, I am no true Athenian. So he's got to shut up again. Secrecy about having an affair with the fairy queen is a matter of state loyalty. We're going to have a play. All the lovers have sorted everything out, and here is an interesting dynamic between Theseus and Hippolyta, where Theseus is the skeptical one. He thinks the lunatic, the lover, and the poet of our imagination all compact. These lovers, this is all craziness. And is that Shakespeare himself announcing it? Well, he might think lovers are lunatics at some point, but he's including the poet in there. So I don't think so. I think there's something to it. And once again, as has happened throughout the play and their interaction, Hippolyta doesn't defy him, but kind of modifies what he has to say and insists, but though all their stories are basically the same, I wouldn't be so dismissive. Maybe there's something to it. All right, well, let's have some entertainment before we all go to bed. Give me some, what's the list of stuff that we can have performed tonight? Well, here's the list. First, we could have the battle with the centaurs to be sung by an Athenian eunuch to a harp. It's another episode from Ovid's Metamorphoses, especially, where these drunken half-animal creatures tried to kidnap and rape the bride. So, will none of that, says Theseus. Yeah, good plan there, Theseus. And he also passes on some other items that might have some literary relevance to Oxford. But we're going to go with the tedious brief scene of young Pyramus and his love Thisbe, very tragical mirth. Theseus asks, merry and tragical, tedious and brief? That is hot ice and wondrous strange snow. How shall we find the concord of this discord? And once again, that's what I'm saying is what we need to do here. We're trying to find concord out of discord, harmony out of noise. His master of revels says, no, this is nothing, this is garbage. But Theseus says, no, we're going to have a generous spirit, and this is what we're going to see. So the play begins with Quince giving a kind of a prologue where he says, if we offend, it is with our goodwill. That you should think we come not to offend, but with goodwill, to show our simple skill. That is the true beginning of our end. Consider then we come but in despite. We do not come as minding to content you, and so on. Theseus puns at the end, this fellow doth not stand upon points. And what's happened here? Well, what's happened is this guy doesn't understand punctuation and he's messing it all up. Like that kid in the Bluebirds in 3rd grade when you were reading and you would say, Dick and Jane went to the park and they played with so frustrating. What he was supposed to say, if he punctuated it right, is more like, if we offend, it is with our goodwill that you should think we come not to offend, but with goodwill to show our simple skill. That is the true beginning. Of our end consider then we come, but in despite we do not come, etc. The significance, why even bother with this, is that it's never played on stage, almost never, because you can't get the joke when it's played that way. Almost. You have to read it. And for all those students of mine who say, we're overanalyzing this, and there's no such thing as overanalyzing, by the way, but no, it was not meant just to sit back and watch TV when it's Shakespeare. He realized in the end that this was literature too, and sometimes you gotta read it. Well, the play begins, the lovers are separated by a wall. There's a lot of rude punning going on there, and they decide to meet at Ninny's tune. Thisbe goes, gets attacked by a lion, but runs off, but her garment is left behind, and Pyramus shows up, sees the garment, and he's distraught, thinking she's dead. And here's his agony.
Oh, wherefore, nature, didst thou lions frame? Since lion vile hath here deflowered my dear, which is, no, which was the fairest dame that lived, that loved, that liked, that looked with cheer. Come tears, confound, out sword, and wound the pap of Pyramus. Ay, that left pap, where heart doth hop. And I die, thus, now I am dead, now I am fled. My soul is in the sky, the tongue lose thy light, moon, take thy flight. No, die.
Aw. Oh, well, that was enough. You know, during this production, all the audience members are making snide comments too. Not necessarily good-natured, but it's certainly not as vicious as the end of Love's Labor's Lost, where those guys are embarrassed and they just absolutely are cruel to people on the stage. But what happens is that previously, when Theseus was skeptical about matters and Hippolyta was more generous, in the play, Hippolyta is the one who's absolutely dismissive. This is just junk. And Theseus says, give them a break. They're doing their best. And so it seems like Shakespeare just wants to say, when you are an audience member, a side of you comes out that is different from your normal persona. Just interesting. Well, Theseus, invited to an epilogue, says, "No epilogue, I pray you, for your play needs no excuse. Never excuse, for when the players are all dead, there need none to be blamed." And everybody's baffled, but what the heck does that mean? Well, I don't know. There is a number of attempted theories that just don't resonate with me whatsoever. But all I can say is the players are all dead. Elizabeth, Burleigh, Oxford, Marlowe, Bacon, Olivier, Gielgud. I mean, the players are all dead, and a lot of them for over 400 years. So there is some kind of comfort or an ease in saying, let's get over it, and there's no more accusations necessary. Well, Oberon blesses the house. Puck offers a final apology for the play and begs for applause, but he doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't have any perspective. He's the one person who could have, because he wasn't involved in one of these weird love couples. But it's up to us to recognize what was the significance here. As we wrap up, here's something that I think I got from Charles Beauclerc, where there's a darker story, despite the good feeling that we've got here, which I want to say another word about. But it's the story of Bottom's lost kingdom. Bottom being an impolitic weaver of words, who enchants the fairy queen with his singing, but whose tongue must be tied in case he blabs. His most rare vision, which is beyond the wit of man to relate, is nothing as banal as the dreamlike memory of an ass's head. It's the specter of the crown which the fairy queen's love for him seemed to portend. Oxford might have been king, and that blows my mind, because you think of some of the people who end up in positions of power. All right, final perspective here. Love is the butt of a colossal joke, and is to be sneered at, because look at it. The madman, the lover, and the poet are all akin. Love makes an ass of you, even literally, and let's just get over it. Yeah, but here's the other problem. You don't feel that at the end of the play. You don't feel like, what a letdown, and go out with a kind of a sneering, cynical attitude. You actually feel pretty good, at least I do. So why is that? And I think it's because not just everybody's getting along and pairing up, or that there's any one particular love pair that you're glad to see, because I don't even trust that, oh, we're so oppressed, we're star-crossed lovers, and once everybody stops oppressing us, then what have we got? But rather that you've got this good fellowship at the end. You don't end up with a love couple being put forth, but you end up with a community of lovers. That seems pretty nice. And I have one more final note here that I might put at the end of any play, which is that to be able to have the gift of making people laugh over 400 years later, or cry, or feel anything, is a humanistic miracle. In this case, to be able to take a tragic story, Pyramus and Thisbe, and turn it into the best comedy in the entire canon is just beyond miraculous. I'm ashamed of myself to what I do and can't do with my own tragedy and misery, which is just drink and bitch. If I could learn to sing it at the latter end of a play commentary, I'd feel a heck of a lot better. And actually, I do.